Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machan Leira Online Smicha. Today we're going to discuss Halacha and Hilchos Shabbos, and just to show you how rich every din and every minig is in Torah. In Hilchos Shabbos, we know the importance of Suda Shabbos, Einig Shabbos. It's tremendous things are said about it, and it's actually brought up from the Gemara says, the Gemara Masechta Beitza says that on Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, and the Neshama Yisera comes in, and the point of the Neshama Yisera is brought. The Gemara says this in Maseches Beitza Daf Tazayin Amud Aleph, and Rashi says, "What's the Neshama Yisera? Roichav leiv lemenucha lesimcha lias pasuach lirvacha v'yoichal v'yishta v'einafshe katz aleim." The effect of the Neshama Yisera makes the day of Shabbos a day of menucha, a day of eating and not being disgusted with food. And some of the Mefarshim say that's what the purpose of the Neshama Yisera is, to make taste in food. It seems to be the opposite of spiritual stuff. And the answer is given, yes, Dafka and Shabbos, every one of the food items that we eat on Shabbos is special, and it has a special taste to it. And it doesn't just have a special taste to it, it actually has a spiritual taste to it, something that the Neshama Yisera learns to appreciate. Now, it shows you how important it is, that the amount of foods and the types of foods that the people eat on Shabbos. Every minig has a rhyme and reason. There's a beautiful svarim written to explain all the different maichalim, why we eat them on Shabbos. But not only what we eat, but when we eat them. There are 4 courses that you eat on the Shabbos evening. It's brought in the Sefer Avodas Hashem, in the name of the Belzer Rebbe, that you have to eat it specifically in that order. Fish first, soup, then meat, and then like farfel, then like a stuffing after. And it's specifically associated to the Dalid Oisius of Shem Hashem. So every food item that you eat on Shabbos is special. So today we're going to concentrate on the food called soup, hot soup on Shabbos, Friday night, that it's makubal that you eat it. What's the significance of it? I'll tell you in a second. But primarily, I want to dedicate most of the time of this year to whatever halachic issues could come about when you're dealing with hot soup and Shabbos. Number 1, the Gemara says in Masechta Brachos Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, Amar Rab Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rab Yochanan, Kol Suda she'ein ba sarif einei Suda. Any meal that you want to call it a real meal, if you don't have as part of the menu sarif, it's not considered a real meal. What is sarif? Rashi says, Tafshil lach sheyesh ba maraq. A soup, a real meal is considered a meal if there is soup. And that's one of the reasons why you have soup on Shabbos. Others say because soup in Hebrew is maraq, mem reish kuf. All food items that we eat on Shabbos have the numerical value of 7. Sheishes yemei breisish, and the 7th day is Shabbos. And mem reish kuf, and mispar katan is 7. Others say you specifically have hot soup because it's the remes to the lechem aponim that was eaten on Shabbos, and the lechem aponim was hot, and the hot lechem aponim was very special, a miracle that it stayed hot and fresh over the whole week, and that was something that they showed, one of the nisim of the Beis Hamikdash, that the bread stayed hot and fresh, and that's why specifically people eat hot soup, and some are makbid to eat it with challah because of the association with lechem aponim. Okay, so we all eat hot soup on Friday night. What halachas you have to be careful when you're preparing the soup until you're serving the soup. So let's start with preparing it before Shabbos. When you prepare a soup before Shabbos and you want it to be, as I mentioned, hot by night, you want it to be warm for the night meal, all the halachas of Siman Reish and Gimel apply, which means to say, for you to be able to leave soup on the fire so it should stay warm, you have all the issues of shehiyah. Shehiyah means, how could I leave food on the fire? Aren't you chayish that when food stays on the fire, you might higher the fire or lower the fire, and that's the Gzeira of Shema Yechata. Shema Yechata in the old times was you would stir the coal. Today's days would be turn the knob, and to prevent that, to make sure that doesn't happen, you have to have grufa or ktuma, which today's days is a blech. The blech, remind you, is a heker that you should not stir the coal, you should not raise the fire or make the fire any lower. Now, how could you avoid having a hot soup without a blech? Is if the food is pre-cooked before Shabbos. If the food, the soup is already Michael ben Drusoi, already before Shabbos, you don't really need a blech for that reason. Because being that it's already almost ready, it's already edible for ben Drusoi, nobody will turn any knobs, nobody will make the fire higher, it's anyways edible. Now here, I want to share with you something what some Achronim speak about. And it's brought in Shailos Teshuvos Minchas Yitzchak Keleches Siman Chav Hey, that when you say that the soup has to be ready, Michael ben Drusoi, in the soup there are different ingredients. There's obviously the water, and there's the vegetables, and there's the chicken, and then some people put in bones, maybe meat bones, and a lot of people like chewing the meat bone. So for some people, by the night meal, they want to suck on the meat bone. So even though it's not usually considered from the edible types of food, but if that's what you put into the soup ingredients, then you not only have to make sure that the vegetables and the water and the chicken is already ready, Michael ben Drusoi. Even the bones, even if you yourself don't eat the bones, but there are people around you that might eat it, that you have to make sure the bones are also edible, Michael ben Drusoi, before Shabbos. Now, L'Payel, if the soup is all edible before Shabbos, you don't even need a blech anymore. For this reason, you need a blech if you're going to take it off on Shabbos to serve and then put it back on. You need a blech for chazara, but for shehiyah, you don't really need a blech anymore because there's no more concern. Yet, the minig is always, if you're going to leave something on the fire, always to have a blech, because without a blech, you're running into many, many more shilas. Okay, point number one. I read that there was a Chassidish Rebbe that Bechlal didn't like maneuvering things around the fire, near the fire, even in a blech, because even though it's halachically allowed, he would use the term that we know, mit fire spilt man sich nicht. When things are close to fire, you don't want to play around. It's too close to comfort of a problem. So in this case, even though the soup is ready before Shabbos, Michael ben Drusoi, you have a blech, so you minimize the chances of any issues of things directly on the fire. Okay, the soup was left there before Shabbos on the blech the way it was allowed. Now it's Friday night. You came home from shul. You want to take some soup out. Now, you can never take food from as the pot is on the fire, to stick in a ladle or anything to take out some things from the pot as it's on the fire. It's definitely a problem, because it's hagasa, to stir or to use a utensil in a pot that's on the fire is a problem. It's mimar bishul. It hastens to cook the things, or cook better the things that are already in the pot. So the first things first is, you want to serve somebody some soup, you got to take off that pot. Let me give you a point that people don't realize. What are you going to use to lift up the pot to cook it, to serve it? What are you going to use? What's the big deal? The big deal is you can't just use any cloth to take it off, because if you're going to use one of the wet towels that are laying around to pick up the pot, you might not know that there's a problem. What problem could there be? The isser of bishul, of cooking, is not only on food. The isser of bishul is even on wax, melting wax, or welding metal together. anything that changes form due to fire is considered bishul. Now, there is a halacha earlier that if you're wearing, in Siman Shin Aleph, if you're wearing wet clothing, you're not allowed to stand next to the fire to warm yourself up because it's boiling, it's cooking the water that's in your garment. You'll learn that in Siman Shin Aleph. If that is that way there, if that is the garment, how about the wet towel? If you have a busy kitchen and there's a wet towel, so there's excess water in the towel, when you're going close to the fire and to pick up the pot, and the pot itself is hot, there's a good chance that you're boiling whatever excess water there is in the towel. So you cannot just take anything to pick up the towel, to pick up the pot. Number one. Number two, of course, while the pot is on the fire, you're never allowed to add anything in it. If you decided that the soup is missing salt, for sure, even though there is a svara that salt takes a long time to cook, and salt was maybe even pre-cooked there, on the fire, you're never allowed to add anything. On the fire, you're never allowed to add anything. So you want to take the soup off the fire to be able to do what you have to do. Fine. So you take a clean towel that's not wet, and you pick it up, and you want to serve soup. Here you run into other issues. Where are you putting down this soup pot? Because just like it has an issue boiling possibly the excess water in the towel, if you're putting it on the counter on a table where there's water, you put it down there, you're boiling that water. People chappen sich nicht. Or if you even eventually, when you empty out the soup and the pot is still hot and you put it into the sink and the sink has water in there, you have an extension of the hot pot boiling water. You have to know vu ein vu uis. Where are you putting this pot down just to start taking out soup? Now, when you take the pot off to start distributing soup, you have to think right then and there, am I taking it off for good? Or am I just serving a couple of people and then I want to put it back on the fire? Because to be able to put it back on the fire, it's a whole different league. To take it off once and for all, then just pick it up, take it off, and that's it, and start serving. And then the other issues will apply, as I will soon say. But if you want to put it back on, you're never allowed to put new, fresh food on a fire on Shabbos. So once you take it off and you give it 5-10 minutes and you're putting it back on the fire, it's not anymore back on. It's putting on like a brand new pot on the fire. It's like something from the fridge on the fire. That you're not allowed to do unless there is a blech. So this is the second reason why you have to have a blech. To make sure that it's not nifsak, that your permission to leave food on the fire is still there, and this is still based on the previous permission that I got Friday, and I'm not putting on fresh food now on the fire because that's nireh k'mevashel. So how do you make sure that it doesn't break the previous permission? With a couple of things in mind. First of all, it has to be daitoi lahachzer. You have to remember, you have to intend that you want to put it back on, and preferably hold it. You don't put it down somewhere for good, because if you put it down somewhere for good, okay, it's done. The permission I got from the beginning is not anymore applicable. Now I'm putting on new food, and it has to be daitei lahachzer. It has to be hot, v'chulu v'chulu. Even though I just told you you're not supposed to put the pot down and forget about it, you still have to hold it in some form. This is something that only applies to the pot of the food, with the food. The pot cover doesn't have that issue, because the pot, if you put on food on the fire, it's nireh k'mevashel. But you don't put a pot cover. The concept of nireh k'mevashel doesn't apply to the pot cover. Uvechein, the pot cover could be put down somewhere. Doesn't have to be held the whole time. So you take off the pot of hot soup, you have in mind that you're putting it back on if you want to put it back on. You still hold it in some form, even if you put it down on the counter. You're still holding in some form, and then you'll get to the next step where you start scooping out soup to serve. Now, Rabbi Sai, there is a different issue with the pot cover. The issue with the pot cover is if the pot cover is left off, and it's 10 minutes that you're serving from the pot soup, and now the pot cover totally cooled down. And then there's condensation in the inside of the pot cover. There's moisture, there's liquid left from the soup that's from the inside of the pot cover. And that liquid, that moisture became cold. When you put that over the pot and then it goes on the fire, you are doing bishul achar bishul, because that completely cools down. And now there is liquid that's going to be recooking. And bishul achar bishul b'davar lach is an issue. So therefore, despite the fact that you're allowed to leave the cover, put it down, and not have in mind that you're putting it back, or just put it down completely, you still have to make sure it doesn't completely cool off, or it doesn't have any moisture in the inside. I did see some suggest, therefore, always try to leave the pot cover on the end of the blech, because the blech is even the other end stays warm. So the food or the liquid on the inside of the pot cover will never become completely cold. That will make it easier for you to put it back on the pot. There won't be issues of bishul achar bishul because it never became cold. Just like you see this issue is with the pot cover, the same comes about when you're dealing with the ladle. You're not going to serve the soup straight out of the pot. You're going to use a ladle to scoop out soup. When you use the ladle to scoop out soup, so the first time you use it, you're serving the first bowl, fine. You're using the second bowl, fine. And what happens? You stop for a moment, stop for a couple minutes, and then you realize there's a third person that wants soup. Now, if there's a couple of minutes in between, the ladle, if it's outside on the counter somewhere, has some leftover of the previous soup. And because it has some leftover previous, if it cooled down and then you put it back into the hot pot of soup to scoop up, you've just cooked, boiled, heated up that soup that was on in the ladle. So others suggest, just like I told you about the pot cover, to leave it in a warm area, it's best that when you're serving soup and people are coming every couple of minutes, leave the ladle in the soup pot so it never cools down to a temperature that might be a problem. I did see a funny thing that those who are machmir about the drops in the other side of the pot cover and the drops and on the ladle, they once came to the Chazon Ish and they said, could we put it back in? So the Chazon Ish felt they were going so strict. He says, tell me, are you so machmir in the laws of Lashon Hara too? But the fact is, this is issues that some bring up as a shaila. All right, so you open the pot, you put the pot on the counter, you're holding it a little, took off the cover, you found yourself a ladle to scoop out the soup, and you have a bowl. So the issues, as I said before about the ladle after a couple of times, also will apply to the bowl. Is it a clean bowl that's coming for the first time for a bowl of soup? Or is this a refill? So the refill has some leftovers of the first serving of soup, which is already cool. And now you're going to pour over it hot soup. You might be cooking that soup. So you might have to wipe off the soup to make sure there's nothing there that the new soup will heat up. You open the pot cover and you see the soup. Sometimes you have a fatty soup, and the whole top layer of the soup has fatty stuff on it. Or some people have the custom, they don't want the vegetables or the chicken to float all around. They put all the ingredients in some net, a sack. I'm not here to talk about issues of borer, choosing what you want. Or what's if somebody's going to say, I'm not even going to stick in my spoon all the way. There's a matzah ball on top. May I, on the fire, just scoop out a matzah ball? And I'm not stirring anything in the pot. On the fire, you don't do anything. But the other issues of borer and noila that might sometimes come up, that's for a different share. Now we're talking about strictly the issues of bishul, stirring and getting involved with a hot pot is very, very problematic. So you took out some soup with a clean ladle, you put it in a clean bowl, and now all is good. Now the bowl, the soup is in your bowl. May I add salt if I feel it's unsalted? May I add mandlach? So salt, you find the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch says one thing, and then the Siddur he's machmir. Salt, there is a discussion between the olden time salt and melech shalanu, because there's 2 points that come in play. Number one, is it something that needs extensive cooking? So then it only boils on fire, not in a kli sheni. And then there's another thing, is if it's already processed, if it was already boiled, maybe yesh bishul acha bishul. It's a davar yavish, it's flaky, but it becomes liquid. So the bottom line in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe says that even in a kli sheni, you don't put in salt. So how do you have a bowl of soup and it doesn't taste good and you want to add soup? What should you do? So you have one or two choices. Either to make sure that the soup is not yatzei ledes. Then if it's a kli sheni that's not yatzei ledes, you can put in soup. You can put in salt. Or you got to pour it over at least to a kli shlishi. How about mandlach? Mandlach, it'll also depend on what type of mandlach it is, because they are already processed. And now it's not a question of being mavashal in the kli sheni. It's a question of bishul achar bishul. Now bishul achar bishul, we paskin according to the Alter Rebbe that bedavar yavish I don't care about, bedavar lach we do. But it all depends how the process of the mandalach was made. Was it made with a little oil? Then it might be an issue only of bishul achar bishul. But if it was made with a heavy amount of oil, then it's a question of tigun, frying, and yesh bishul achar tigun. So therefore, just a simple bowl of soup, to enjoy a hot bowl of soup in Shabbos, you have to brush up on so many different parts of the halacha, and we only touch on the bishul part. There are so many other things that you could also connect to this bowl of soup.